Howdy folks, welcome to Module 5 of the Microsoft MD-102 course. Today's module is called Manage Authentication and Compliance. It consists of 4 main sections. Let's start by putting them on a screen for you guys. The first one will be Protect Identities in Azure Active Directory. Then we'll move on to Enable Organization Access, followed by Implement Device Compliance. And then the fourth and the last one we'll cover in this module will be Generate Inventory and Compliance Reports. All right, there you have it, folks. That is the 4 main sections we'll be covering in this specific module. If you guys haven't done it already, you know what to do at this point in time. Please remember to give this video a like. It does help me in the video out a lot. If you'd like to know when other modules for this course comes out, maybe consider subscribing as well. All right, let's go have some fun. Alrighty folks, let's start with that first main section we listed earlier, which was Protect Identities in Azure Active Directory. Within this first section, we're going to start things off with the topic of Windows Hello for Business. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't actually know what this Windows Hello for Business is. In the beginning, when Windows 10 was released, at that point, hardly anyone knew what this was. Now, looking at this point in time where we are right now, more folks actually know what it is, and they've kind of started using it. I wouldn't say people are fully using it yet. I mean, there's still a lot of people out there that have no idea what it is. But compared to back in the day when it came out, it's gotten better, I have to say. So what does this magical thing do, you ask? Well, folks, in Windows 10 and 11, of course, Windows Hello for Business replaces passwords with strong two-factor authentication on PCs and mobile devices. So it's not just for computers. All right, so now we know it's a type of authentication. So this authentication consists of a new type of user credential that is tied to a device and uses biometric authentication or a PIN. There are various issues or problems that Windows Hello addresses for us. For example, if you look at things like strong passwords, for instance, these can be quite difficult to remember at times, and you'll find that users often reuse the same passwords, or they'll go and use the same passwords on multiple platforms and websites, which is not ideal. We don't want to do that. Server breaches, that can expose symmetric network credentials. Passwords are subject to replay attacks. Users can inadvertently expose their passwords due to phishing attacks, and the list of problems goes on and on, folks. So there's many problems that this Windows Hello will basically address for you. So Windows Hello helps you with all the things I just mentioned, and of course much more. Wow, I sound like I'm selling you guys something. No, I am not selling you guys something. I just happen to be explaining something which, well, is on the course. So with Windows Hello, it lets your users authenticate to either your normal, traditional on-premises Active Directory, or you can go and authenticate to your Azure Active Directory if you, your client, or users have acquired this now, obviously at this point in time. It lets your users authenticate to a Microsoft account, to an Active Directory account, so this is your traditional on-premises Active Directory, or of course your Azure Active Directory account, which I just mentioned to you guys. Now, once you've got Windows Hello all set up, it provides reliable, fully integrated biometric authentication based on facial recognition or fingerprint matching. Now, the fingerprint matching part is going to be important later, folks, so remember that part. Folks, Windows Hello also uses a combination of special infrared cameras and software to increase accuracy and guard against spoofing, because you are going to get a couple of jokers out there that'll try and fool the cameras. They're going to have a high resolution photo or something of someone's face in front of the camera and attempt to, well, unlock this machine and basically trick it. So it's got all kinds of special cameras and special software and all kinds of doohickeys, which basically prohibits people from doing so. So the next time you think you're going to be funny or smart or clever and you think you're going to hold up a high resolution photo in front of the camera, guess again. it's going to be able to detect that that is a photo and it's not an actual person. How they do that, don't ask me. I'm not a developer, I'm just a trainer for this specific course, but they are able to do that. Now, what if you do not have a camera, or a fancy camera that is? That is why I said the fingerprint part is going to be, well, important. You can always go and get yourself a fingerprint scanner for this user or yourself, and just plug that sucker in, and well, there you go. It's going to work just as good as the cameras. It's just going to use your fingerprint instead of, well, a camera. Now, something you guys will notice nowadays is major hardware vendors are actually shipping devices that have integrated Windows Hello compatible cameras, like I said kind of a moment ago. Now, for those devices that don't currently have this, which there is a chance, you can go and do what I said just a moment ago. You can just go get yourself a fingerprint reader and it, well, achieve the same goal. All right, let's talk a bit about actually deploying this Windows Hello. There are many options from which you can choose when deploying Windows Hello for Business. Microsoft provides us with multiple options to help ensure that nearly every organization can, in fact, deploy Windows Hello for Business. So, in other words, there's no excuse not to go and do it, is what they're saying. The only downside about providing people with so many options, unfortunately, is it makes the platform and all of it seem a little bit more complex. It makes it seem more complex than it actually is. It is actually just Microsoft giving you many options, but the drawback is it makes it look more complicated than what it actually is. It scares a lot of people, in my opinion. What a lot of organizations will realize once they start looking into this and maybe even start deploying this is they actually have, in fact, already deployed most of the infrastructure that Windows Hello depends on. So in the end, it's probably not going to be nearly as much work to go and implement this as you might have originally thought. There's a very good chance that you, the organization, your client's organization has 10 to 1 already deployed most, if not all, the infrastructure you might need for Windows Hello. You just need to start the process and then you'll see, oh, okay, you know what? I actually have this already in place. All right, so as for deployment models, folks, there are three deployment models from which you can choose. They are cloud only, hybrid, and on premises. The cloud only model is for organizations who only have cloud identities. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? And who do not access on-premises resources. These organizations typically join their devices to the Azure Active Directory and exclusively use resources in the cloud such as SharePoint, OneDrive, and of course others. Now, folks, for this cloud-only scenario, which I just mentioned to you, you should configure Windows Hello for Business by using Intune. So for the cloud, you need to use Intune. Currently, Intune is the only cloud-based management system that can be used to configure Windows Hello for Business on Windows 10 and Windows 11 devices joined to your Azure Active Directory. Now, looking at the other two options I've listed for you folks on the screen, which is hybrid and on-premises, starting with the bottom one of the three, I know, it's a bit backwards, but for some reason Microsoft lists these things in some weird order, which is not the correct order in my opinion. Anyway, looking at the on-premises option, the third one on the list, this deployment model is for organizations that don't have cloud identities or use applications hosted in Azure Active Directory. It's all old school, it's all on premises. Windows Hello for Business supports this scenario and you can use it on Windows 10 or 11 machines, once again, without cloud service. Now, with regards to this on-premises model, folks, the old school one, you should use group policies to deploy and configure Windows Hello for Business. So the cloud-only one, that's the one where everything is online. That one you use Intune. It's the only way to get it done. With the model where everything is on premises, old school, there you go and use group policy. Now, looking at the last model on the list, the third one, the middle one, that one is called hybrid. Hybrid, for those of you that don't know, is when you combine on-premises and cloud with each other. Now you can see why I left that for last. We first covered the cloud only, then we covered on-premises only, and now thirdly, lastly, we're looking at the two combined. So in my opinion, that should have been last on the list, but hey. So that is why I left that one for last, guys, is because I feel it should be last. Now, when an organization uses both the on-premises traditional Active Directory as well as the newer Azure Active Directory Cloud, that is when you have yourself a hybrid model. Considering that hybrid is, well, both on-prem and in the cloud, you can now actually go and choose which one of the earlier methods you want to go and use. So I'm talking about Intune and group policy. You remember I said if it's cloud only, you have to use Intune. If it's on-premises only, you've got to use group policy. But if you've got yourself a hybrid situation, which is this third one, you have a choice now, folks. You can choose between Intune or group policy. It's dealer's choice. All right, I think that is enough said about the free deployment models. Let's have a chat about managing Windows Hello for business. So when it comes to managing Windows Hello for business, folks, in Microsoft Intune, Windows Hello can be deployed as part of a device configuration profile. In case you didn't know, these profiles are used to configure various settings on Windows 10 and later devices. With device configuration profiles in Intune, you can disable usage of Windows Hello for business and also configure, well, the following settings, which include things like minimum or maximum password length, pin complexity, expiration, and history. Just FYI, with complexity, this is where you go and specify the password has to contain certain things. Has to contain numbers, symbols, lowercase, uppercase, that kind of stuff. Oh, and the settings also include things like TPM and things like certificates for on-premises resources. So with regards to managing Windows Hello for Business, you can do this in 3 ways. Sorry for the small pause there, folks. I had to switch mics there quickly. The other one was giving me a bit of nonsense. You know how it is. Anyway, so with regards to managing Windows Hello for business, you can do this in 3 ways, as I was saying before my mic started giving me grief. The first is to use group policy. Now, folks, with regards to group policy, you have to be running the Windows 10 or later client operating system. This will not work on any client operating system released before Windows 10. So it's not going to work on Windows 7, 8, 8.1 or anything older than that because, well, they don't support Windows Hello. They don't know what Windows Hello is. So this is a function and a feature that came out only on Windows 10 and later. So it's only on ones that it's going to work on. So with group policy, you will need to go and configure the enable Windows Hello for business group policy. So you're going to have to actually go into your group policies and you're going to have to go and turn something on which is called enable Windows Hello for business. If you don't do that, it ain't going to work. Now, as for the other 2 ways you can manage Windows Hello, that would be modern management, folks, and mixed. Alrighty, I think that's enough of that. Let's move on to the topic of self-service password reset in Azure Active Directory. Now, for those of you that don't know what self-service password reset is or what it means, folks, that is when people, more specifically your users, has the ability to go and reset their own passwords. It sounds like a fantasy. It sounds like a fairy tale because normally we technicians, we always have to go and do this for these people. I'm sure that a lot of you guys that's watching this video have probably had at some point in time where you had to go and reset people's passwords. People coming into your office, phoning you, sending you messages, sending you emails. I forgot my password. And this is normally just because of them being stupid or doing something silly. So it's a very, very frustrating thing to have to go and deal with companies with. Now, what if I told you you don't have to deal with that? There is a way for you to get these folks to go and reset their own password. So you can think of this as those little links you'll find on certain websites that says forgot my password. So if you go to your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, your whatever, your Gmail, and you forget what your login is, as long as you are the real original authentic owner to that account or whatever this is, you can always just go click on forgot my password and there will be a way for you to go and reset that password. This could be something like having to answer a couple of security questions. It can be a matter of you're going to receive something via another email address, maybe a link. Maybe you're going to receive a one-time PIN, in other words, an OTP in your phone, So there's normally various ways you can go and recover these accounts, provided, of course, that you are the original owner. Now, with Microsoft, it is no different. Now, unfortunately, folks, when it comes to self-service password reset, ADDS in Windows Server does not natively support this. So if you don't know what ADDS is, or if you don't remember, ADDS stands for Active Directory Domain Services. That is your traditional Active Directory on premises. Your old school one that we've been using for the last couple of decades. So we do have the ability to reset passwords, but the user themselves cannot do it. They need you to go and do that. So there's cases I've seen some users can go and do that by pressing Control Delete. That's assuming they have not forgotten the password yet and they've already logged on. They can generally go and press Control Delete and they can go reset it sometimes like that. But generally, no. ADDS does not actually natively support that. Now, Azure Active Directory, that supports it by default. So that's the new one that you can find in the cloud. What a lot of people don't realize here is if you were to go into Azure Active Directory in the cloud, I'm not sure if this is actually part of the course, but let me mention it to you guys anyway. If you go to Azure Active Directory in the cloud, yes, we just said you can go and change the password yourself as the user. Now, what you can go and do from the administrator's perspective is you can go and enable password write back. So what that means is if you happen to have an Active Directory on premises and at the same time you've got one in the cloud, we call this a hybrid Active Directory, and you've got these two bad boys synchronized with one another. If you were to go and enable something called password write back, the user can go to the normal Azure Active Directory in the cloud where we know already they can go and change the password. But there's a but now. If they go and change the password there, it's actually going to go and write that back down to on premises and change their password on premises at the same time. So while they're doing it in the cloud, which is technically the only place they can go and do it, it's going to automatically synchronize that back down to on premises, and their password indirectly, wink wink, would have changed on premises as well. So there is a way of getting it done, but this is called the password write back feature. You need to go and enable that in the cloud. If you don't do that on the Azure portal, no dice. It ain't going to work. So yeah, you must set this functionality in the Azure portal if you would like to go and use that. That's the password write back feature. The self-service password reset requires you to define alternative authentication methods, including, and I'm going to mention a couple here for you guys, Office phone, mobile phone. Yes, I know it sounds like the same thing, but that's what the course specifies. So that's what I'm specifying to you guys. If it was up to me, I would just say specify a phone number. You can go and specify an alternative email address, security questions, and the list goes on. So those are pretty standard things. So you or the user, it's probably going to be the user, have to go and specify a phone number. I would recommend using a mobile phone number, an email address, or a couple of security questions. And this is just in case you or the user gets locked out one day so they can go and, well, gain access again. So if they specified security questions, they're going to have to go and answer their own questions. If they specified an alternative email address, basically a backup if you want to call it that, they're going to receive some sort of link in this backup email address. They're going to have to go and click on it, and that will give them access again. If it's a phone number, it's most likely going to send them some sort of one-time PIN, an OTP, and they'll have to type this in somewhere on some sort of portal, and then they'll obviously gain access again. And that's the gist of it, guys. Pretty straightforward, right? Alright, so that brings us to the end of the first main section in this module. Not too bad, is it? And we can move on to the second main section in this module, which is called Enable Organizational Access. The first thing we're going to be talking about in this section, folks, is enable access to organization resources. So with Windows Server 2016 or later, and also with Windows 10 or later clients, there are actually several ways to access local network infrastructure when connecting from the outside. When you use a traditional way to access internal network from the outside, you usually do it by establishing something like a, well, VPN connection. Windows Server has a remote access server role that can be configured as a server that terminates and routes VPN connections established from the internet or other external networks. So that's what I'm sure a lot of you guys know already. In Windows environments, VPN connections were mostly established from the internet or other external networks. So if you go take a trip down memory lane, that's basically how we've been doing it, well, for the last decade or two, and most companies probably still do it that way. In Windows environments, VPN connections were mostly established on demand and based on PPTP, L2TP, or SSTP protocol. That's basically how we used to go and do it. However, you can also choose other ways to access internal resources from the outside. Or you can choose to publish internal resources on external networks such as internet. So you can actually go and publish it to the outside, but you are taking a leap of faith then. I wouldn't advise it. So to create seamless connections between internal servers and clients located outside, Microsoft originally introduced the direct access technology. This technology has, however, been replaced by something newer, but we'll get to that in a moment. So this technology provided the ability not just to access internal resources without manually having to establish a VPN connection, but also to manage external clients with management tools such as Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager and Group Policy, even when they are not in the internal network. How dope is that? This technology, of course, evolved into what is now called always on. So you can see that's what we're getting to. That's going to be our next topic, by the way. So direct access is what we used to use. Now it's called always on or always VPN. It's actually called always VPN. Sorry. So yeah, this used to be direct access. Now it's called always VPN, which is available in Windows Server 2016 and later, in case you're wondering. Most technologies for remote access or publishing of internal resources are based on remote access server role in Windows Server. Now, folks, the remote access server role is a logical grouping of the following related network access technologies. That would be remote access service, which is called as RAS for short, routing, and web application proxy. When you install the remote access server role with the add roles and features wizard or Windows PowerShell, you can install one or more of these free role services. And then one last very important thing I want to add on to this, folks, before we move on to that next topic, which you kind of have an idea what it is. Please do not attempt to deploy remote access on a virtual machine in Microsoft Azure. Using remote access in Microsoft Azure is not supported there, folks. It is not. You can't use remote access in Azure virtual machines to deploy VPN, direct access, or any other remote access feature in Windows Server 2016 or earlier versions of Windows Server. Trust me, I've tried, folks. It does not work there. It is not supported there. Maybe later on Microsoft will go and add it, but the last time I checked, it doesn't work. Alrighty, now moving on to the next topic, which once again I think you guys know what it is. Earlier, you guys would have heard me mention this. Here it is now. Always on VPN. So always on VPN provides a single cohesive solution for remote access and supports domain joined as well as non-domain joined or Azure Active Directory joined devices, and believe it or not, even personally owned devices. So your good old-fashioned BYOD scenarios. Always on VPN is basically a technology introduced in Windows 10 that, well, allows users to stay connected to their internal networks even when they're outside of company premises. That's amazing, isn't it? Or in general, when they're connected to the internet. Unlike traditional VPN connections that would normally require a user to manually initiate when he or she wants to connect to the company's network, Always On does this automatically. So it's very much like direct access because it used to do that as well. So it does this automatically even before the user signs in, assuming you've configured it that way. You have to go and configure it in case you're wondering. Also, if you or these users find themselves in a situation where the internet link fails, it goes off for whatever reason, it will automatically reconnect as soon as the internet connection is, well, restored. They don't need to do anything from their side. It'll automatically reconnect and everything's going to be hunky-dory automatically. I love the simplicity. I like the automation side of things. It just makes your life easier. So with this technology, users do not need to concern themselves with whether they need to initiate a VPN connection to access a resource. No, they don't have to do that because, quite frankly, when I used to be in a field, if I had to go and explain to a user first what a VPN is, or even if let's say you decide to skip that part. Let's say you just go to the person's laptop or desktop, you show them the VPN connection they need to click on, and you tell them, ma'am, sir, when you are home or when you are not at the office, I need you to click here, I need you to click on connect, and I need you to type in your username and password. Now that alone sounds very simple to you guys most likely, but try explaining that to the end user. So to help with your health and to help avoid you guys going crazy, because we know these users are going to give us a lot of gray hair, always on VPN takes care of all of that. You don't have to go and worry about having to try and explain to a user that they are in fact working remotely somewhere, because they are going to have no idea what you're talking about. As soon as you tell them, ma'am, sir, you're actually working remotely, they're going to be like, what do you mean? I can see my laptop on my screen in front of me. What do you mean I'm working remotely? I can see everything in front of my computer. I'm not working remotely. So it's going to give you chest pains trying to have to explain this to people. So luckily now you don't have to deal with that anymore. Always VPN, it's automatically going to go reconnect. You just go and set it up, and from there you don't worry about it anymore. It's going to make your life a lot easier, guys. Now, Always VPN has many benefits over Windows VPN solutions of the past, such as, besides the ones I've just mentioned, platform integration, security, VPN connectivity, networking control, and lastly, folks, configuration and compatibility. So these are just extras that Microsoft are mentioning besides the ones I just mentioned to you guys. The simplicity factor, the concept that it connects automatically, the fact you don't have to go and struggle with silly users that don't know what the heck you're talking about half the time and all that kinds of stuff. So besides all those benefits I just mentioned, which is actually more applicable in my opinion, you also have these ones that Microsoft just mentioned for us. Alright, so still on the topic of always on VPN, let's talk about deploying always on VPN. When preparing for always on VPN deployment, you should ensure that you have the following components in place, folks. So I'm going to list a couple of things you guys need to make sure that you've got in place. Starting off with Active Directory domain infrastructure, probably the most obvious one out of the whole lot that I'm going to mention for you guys. But yes, you need to have that in place. I think to help with this, let me just put a picture here on the right for you guys as well. It's not the best picture, but it should give you guys a ballpark idea of what is needed. Secondly, you need to have Active Directory based public key infrastructure in place. You need to have a physical server to install the network policy server on. You need to have remote access as a remote access service gateway VPN. You need a perimeter network that includes 2 firewalls. You need a physical server or a virtual server on your perimeter network with physical Ethernet network adapters to install remote access as a RAS gateway VPN server. And lastly, folks, you of course need a management platform of your choice to manage it all. Otherwise, how are you going to go and do that? So there is just a ballpark idea of some of the components you will have to go and make sure. Well, let me just say you should make sure that you've got all of those in place. Otherwise, guys, it's not going to work. So it might seem easy, but sometimes it's not. There's a little bit more happening in the engine room than some people might actually believe. So yeah, anyway, that brings us to the end of the second section in this module, folks. Moving on to the third section, which is implement device compliance. Now, folks are going to see we're going to be talking about quite a few fun topics in this specific section, but let's start things off with protect access to resources using, of course, Intune. I mean, the fact that I'm saying Intune should not come as a surprise. This course is quite heavy on Intune. It's Intune, Intune, Intune. Anyway, with regards to protecting access to your resources, you can go and configure quite a few things, guys. And when I say this, I mean this from the administrator's perspective, obviously. You can go and allow access to email and documents only from devices that are managed by MDM and comply with company policy. In case you don't remember, MDM stands for Mobile Device Management, and this can be more than one thing, but in this instance, we're referring to Intune. So if these devices in question are not managed by the MDM, in other words, your company Intune, then they will not be allowed to access email and documents. That is, in fact, something you can go and configure with regards to your policies and stuff. Pretty cool, right? So if you or your company or your client's company does not want people to go and use devices that does not belong to the company, for instance, Well, you can go and block them. You can configure it in such a manner so they have to use company devices to be able to access company resources. And this is for many reasons. This is to ensure security, to ensure that data does not get leaked or stolen, etc., etc. You can also go and define company policies by using the device security policy in Microsoft 365 or device compliance in Intune. Speaking of compliance, guys, we are going to be talking about compliance policies very shortly, and we're also going to be talking about conditional access policies very shortly. Both of which are very cool, very useful, and quite frankly, I've got a very special place in my heart for those two. I love them. They're really going to make your life easier. Anyway, so with regards to conditional access, you can use conditional access policies to control access to email, documents, and other cloud apps, as well as evaluate sign-in risk, device type, location, and client apps. So basically, in a nutshell, what happens here, and I don't want to go too far because I know we're still going to cover this in this module, but using conditional access policies, you can go and specify conditions, like the name suggests, that needs to be met first before these users will be granted access to certain resources. So this is especially useful if people are working from home, which is the case more than half the time these days. I mean, nobody's coming in just to the office anymore. People used to come into the office, they would sit at their desk every day, which was a laptop and a desktop. It would be Windows and that was it. And I remember 10 or 20 years we would complain about that, but nowadays people do not necessarily come into the office. Half of people work from home or wherever. They do not necessarily use a laptop or a desktop. They could potentially be using a tablet or phone. And this is not necessarily a Windows device. This could potentially be an Android device, an iOS device, or some other form of platform. And this brings about a whole new can of worms when it comes to managing these devices. Now, with all of that being said, if these people are wherever on whatever device, you'll probably want to go and specify a couple of conditions first that needs to be met by these users or their devices before they will be allowed to access resources. So if they are using their personal device, probably even a more better reason for them to go and meet these conditions. You can say, okay, my bra, you need to have at least multi-factor authentication, and you need to have at least an 8-character password. Your device needs to be Windows. It needs to be at least Windows 10. It needs to be at least this build or this edition of Windows 10. You need to have at least this and that and this and that before you can access the following information. So these are examples of a conditional access, but like I said, I'm jumping the gun. We're going to get to this in just a moment. So, and then also, if a device isn't enrolled to Intune, its compliance can't be evaluated, but you can prevent access to mailboxes, documents, and cloud apps from such devices. Now, it's really going to count in your favor to enroll these devices into your Intune environment, because if you enroll them, you can just do so much more. You can actually go and basically check if they are compliant. So if you've specified compliancy policies that needs to be met, you can go and check whether these devices are in fact compliant with the policies you've specified. So if you specified something as simple as everybody needs to have multi-factor authentication on devices, you can actually go and check how many people are actually, compliant with that. Maybe it's just 80%, maybe it's 90% of people. But if these devices are not enrolled into Intune environment, yeah, no guys, you're not going to be able to see this as accurately as you would like. Alright, so let's get to that next topic, which I kept saying, hey, I don't want to jump the gun, I don't want to jump the gun, which is device compliance. Or should I say, device compliancy policies. So this consists of rules, as I think you guys might have gathered by now. And these rules include things like password settings, encryption settings, jailbroken or rooted devices, and then obviously other things like the minimum or the maximum operating system version and a lot more. So just to go through that list very quickly, in case some of you guys don't know what some of those things are. Password settings would be things like the person has to have multi-factor authentication. And you can obviously go and say, okay, these people have to use uppercase, lowercase numbers and symbols. Encryption settings, that could be that these devices have to be BitLocker encrypted. As an example, if the device is not BitLocker encrypted, they will not be granted access to company resources because they're seen as a liability. They're seen as a risk. As for jailbroken or rooted, broken, let me put it that way, is a term we use with Apple devices, iOS. Rooted is a term we use with Android devices. It's basically the same thing. The rooted is just for Android, jailbroken is for iOS. That is when you go onto that device, you go to the dialer, you type in a bunch of special keys. It's going to look like you're just pressing random numbers, hashes, and stars. And at some point, you can actually go and unlock the hidden developer options on that phone. So just like on computers and servers where there's all kinds of hidden tools, administrative tools that only you know about, and even if the user does know about it, they don't know how to go and use it. A cell phone or a phone or a tablet is the same thing, guys. They've got all kinds of cool tools that most of us don't know about, and even if you do know about them, you probably don't know how to go and use them. So these are tools that are used by cell phone technicians or phone or mobile technicians for the most part. Now, to gain access to that, you need to go and jailbreak the device or root the device. Now, you'll hear there's a lot of people out there that says some of these tools can in fact be used to go and do things that's not so nice, to go and break into things. And because of that, companies see these devices as a liability. So if you're going to try and access company resources with a device that's been jailbroken or a device that's been rooted, it is seen as a security risk. That device will not be granted access. Now, what you can go and do in those situations is you can actually, in fact, go and undo what you did. If it's been jailbroken, you can go and undo it. If it's been rooted, you can go and unroot it for the most part. And once you do that, you will be granted access again. So yeah, you can go and turn this on. Most companies have that turned on. And then, of course, the minimum and maximum operating system version will be things like forcing these people to use, let's say, Windows, or forcing them to use Android or iOS. Yes, there is many situations where you might actually, in fact, require people to use exclusively just Android in your company, or just iOS, or just Windows. And this can be for many reasons. Each of these operating systems have their own unique benefits, and they each have their own unique drawbacks. Whatever your unique situation or your client's unique situation is, you can force the people in that environment to have a certain operating system or have a certain version of that operating system or a certain build operating system. You can basically force them to meet your needs. So device compliancy policies can be used with or without conditional access policies. You don't have to go and put conditional access policies in place. You can, where you grant them access to certain resources if they meet certain conditions. So you can go and do that as an extra, or you can skip it. These device compliancy policies are deployed based on the user and not the device. Because you might find that maybe user 1 will log on with device 1 today, and device 1 is perfectly compliant. And then tomorrow, user 1 suddenly logs in with a new device. Maybe he or she bought themselves a new device because they lost the old one. And that new device is not completely compliant yet. So that's why it's not based on the device. It is in fact based on the user account. And then lastly, device compliancy policies are monitored from the device compliance dashboard. Just FYI, in case you guys don't know. Alright, and then I'm going to take you guys to the other topic that I kept mentioning, which I kept jumping as well, which is conditional access. At this point in time, I don't know if I should even cover it because I've said so much about it already. I don't know if it's even worth covering. But anyway, nonetheless, this provides policy-based granular access to resources. You're going to basically say, hey, Sam, if you don't have the following conditions met, you're not going to be granted access. Basically, like I said earlier. Sam has to have MFA. Sam has to have a password. Sam has to have BitLocker, encryption. Or Sam, believe it or not, has to be geographically speaking in a specific location. I kid you not. That's actually a setting. You can actually go and configure it in such a manner so that a user has to geographically be in a certain place before they'll be granted access. They can have the right machine, the right password, the right username, the right everything, but if they're not geographically in their correct location, they will not be granted access. You can specify any location you want, but generally you'll find this is going to be some place like the office that's been specified, maybe the person's home environment if they work from home a lot. And the way we do this is normally to go and use the public IP address of that destination. So if you're going to be specifying your office as a geographic location, you will be specifying the public IP address of your office environment. Now, before anyone goes and asks in the comment section, yes, you can VPN to the office And yes, it will work, and yes, you will bypass it. So this is not to stop people, it's just to discourage bad behavior. No security out there will ever stop any form of hacking or whatever it is you want to go and call it these days. It is just to discourage bad behavior. So the more you go and add, the more inconvenient it's going to become for the perpetrator, and hopefully that will discourage them from doing this nonsense, whatever nonsense it is was they were up to in the first place. So yes, it allows workers to work from essentially anywhere on most devices while helping maintain security. It guides the user for fixing a denied access request. I mean, how cool is that? So that's hopefully going to result in less emails. Microsoft says it guides the user for fixing it, but even if it is idiot proof, I actually want to put it that way, even if it's completely idiot proof, I guarantee you guys now, 3 out of 4 people will probably still harass you, still send you emails and say, can you please help me? Because you get a lot of users that's just plain lazy. They know how to fix it, they just don't want to. They want you to go and do it. They want you to spoon feed them. And then, of course, you get those ones that are just, well, special, if you know what I'm saying. Common scenarios where you might want to go and use conditional access, in case you're wondering, is conditional access maybe based on an app. So they have to use a certain app, or if they do use a certain app, they need to meet certain conditions. Conditional access based on network. So if they are on a certain network, certain conditions will apply. Or if they're not on a certain network, certain conditions will apply. Or they just plain out need to be on a certain network. That might be specified as a condition. So you can look at this many ways. And then the last one I want to mention here is conditional access based on device trust. You or the user will be granted access to a resource based on whether we or it trusts the device in question. So this device has to be added to an allowed list. The device has to meet these T's and C's in the sense of it has to be a certain build, a certain edition, a certain Windows, or a certain this and a certain that. Once all of these T's and C's have been met, then of course you'll be granted access. Well, folks, we've probably covered that a little bit too much, but at the end of the day, it was a fun topic. So that brings us to the end of the first main section. And finally, we're going to be moving on to the fourth and the last main section of this module, which is generate inventory and compliance requests. Alright, folks, the first topic, and actually the only topic in this last section is a very short and quick one, is report enrolled devices inventory in Intune. So that's for the most part what this one's going to be about. So the first thing I want to say here to you guys is Microsoft Endpoint Manager provides several different options for creating and viewing reports. Both Endpoint Configuration Manager and Intune provide out-of-the-box reports. You can also create custom reports by leveraging services such as Intune Data Warehouse and tools such as Power BI, which I'll list for you guys in just a moment. Anyway, so while Endpoint Manager Admin Center does not include any reports specifically for inventory in the reports node, if you know what the reports node is, you can still report on all devices and all applications using the devices and apps tab, just FYI. Also, on the Intune side, Intune provides built-in tools for reporting and monitoring compliance, much like we would probably expect from it. These reports enable administrators to focus on situations and take action. Device compliance reports are meant to be broad in nature and provide a more traditional reporting view of data to identify aggregated metrics. Regarding all these fancy reports I keep talking about, you can download reports in CSV format for all devices and applications within the Intune portal, just in case you guys are wondering, since we are talking about Intune here and inventory. So if you're talking about Intune and inventory, you can go and download these reports in a CSV format on the Intune portal, guys. You might just have to go and dig for it, but it is there. It can be done. It's definitely possible. So just mentioning that to you guys. It should come as no surprise that this is in a CSV format either, because they love CSV format. And if you go into the Azure portal even, you'll find that almost everything you upload and download these days is always going to be in some freaking CSV format for some reason. It's almost like they've got a fetish for the thing. You can also download audit logs, since we're talking about downloading things. So you can download audit logs, which provide a record of activities that generate a change in Intune. So if you guys need to go and download audit logs, if you need to see what's happening in your environment, it is most certainly possible to go and do that as well. And then if you guys want richer reports, you can go and use the Intune Data Warehouse and Power BI, which I spoke of just a moment ago. And alternatively, you can also go and use Microsoft Graph API, which lets you access all Intune data. That's just for the guys that want richer reports, of course. Well, guys, there's not much else I can say here about this topic, so I believe that concludes the fourth main section and this module. I really hope you guys have learned something in this module. If you have, do me a favor, give the video a like, do your homie a favor here. And then, of course, if you'd like to know when module 6 for this course comes out, or if you just want to maybe stay tuned for my other courses, maybe consider subscribing, or don't. That really is your choice in the day. Before you guys disappear, this is the part where I just give a special shout out and thank you to all of those sponsors that's sponsoring me in the channel. Thank you to all the Patreon guys. Thank you to all of those of you that's doing donations on PayPal. Those of you clicking on the thanks button below. There's the video. There's a thanks button. And also those of you just buying me coffees and milkshakes. So here on the screen, there is the Patreon supporters. Thank you very much, guys. And there is the PayPal sponsors. Thank you very much, guys. And like usual, the end of this video, I'm just going to mention again that there is a Discord server for those of you that's interested. It's an IT community. It's completely free. For those of you that know what Discord is, you can join a server. It's called Free IT Training. And there it's basically a community where, or I'm also in there. You can go and find buddies that's studying also this very same course that you guys are studying. They are studying other similar courses that's also Microsoft or other vendors like CompTIA, Cisco, you name it. They're all there. So if you've got questions, chances are those people have the answers for you. Maybe I have the answers. Maybe you see someone else asking a question and you know the answer. It's basically, in short, a community for IT people that wants to help one another. It's like-minded people. Maybe you just want to hang out of like-minded people. You know, whatever. Maybe you've got an issue at work and you want to find out if someone else has had the same issue. Maybe they've got a solution to your problem. Either way, it's a fun IT community for studying and, well, sharing knowledge. Alrighty, my homies, that brings us to the end of Module 5. Once again, remember to like and subscribe. I will talk to you all again in Module 6 of the Microsoft MD-102.